BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds, in-game live betting online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NFL football to NBA basketball, college hoops, and more, NHL and UCF. Just head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use the promo code Bleav, B-L-E-A-V, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online. The game starts here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bleav in Bengal podcast. Yours truly, Solomon Wilcots. The Cincinnati Bengals playoff hopes remains alive after the Cincinnati Bengals survive in overtime against one of the best defenses in the NFL as they defeat the Denver Broncos 30-24 in overtime. Joe Burrow was simply at his best. Not only does he get 3 touchdown passes for the 8th consecutive game, but he throws for over 400 yards in an overtime effort. Well, who can forget the 32-yard bomb down that left sideline that set up the 2-yard touchdown pass to T. Higgins? Higgins came through big time. I know he had a fumble in this game. I don't know that anyone who I was watching the game with anyway, we all felt bad for T. Higgins, but we always knew that he would redeem himself. Like, you couldn't even be upset with T. Higgins. He's so good for the Bengals in so many different ways that you knew he'd more than make up for it. And boy, did he. Cincinnati Bengals come away a winner. Now they need to win week 18 on the road at Pittsburgh to get into the postseason. But in addition to that, they need the Denver Broncos to lose to Kansas City in the final week of the regular season. We also need the Miami Dolphins to lose to the New York Jets in the final week of the regular season. Good luck. Good luck if we think all that's going to happen. I live in a space and in a mindset that if you're going to do something, you got to do it yourself. Don't look to get help from anybody else because it's probably not going to happen. If you think that the Miami Dolphins are going to help us get into the playoffs, or the New York Jets beating the Dolphins is going to help us get in the playoffs, not happening. I'm sorry. I'll believe it when I see it. If you think the Kansas City Chiefs, that's right, even with Carson Wentz as a starter, you think they're going to help us get into the playoffs? You think the Kansas City Chiefs want to help the Bengals get into the playoffs? Not going to happen, because Joe Burrow arguably has the hottest arm of any quarterback going into the postseason. And, oh, by the way, there are some good ones. There are some good quarterbacks going into the playoffs. You can't argue about the job that, Jared Goff has done for the Detroit Lions. You cannot argue about the 13 games with a 100 passer rating that Sam Darnold has put up with the Minnesota Vikings. You cannot argue about the season that Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson is having for their respective teams. But no quarterback is playing better than Joe Burrow. 8 straight games of 3 touchdown passes or more. He's had 10 games with 3 touchdown passes or more this season. He is playing lights out at a phenomenal rate. 4,000 yards passing, over 40 touchdowns, and we still have a game left on the remaining schedule. There's no quarterback playing better than Joe Burrow, and that's why you're not going to get the Jets, the Miami Dolphins, the Kansas City Chiefs, or the Denver Broncos helping us to get into the playoffs. We're going to have to do it ourselves, and unfortunately, not only do we got to go up on the road to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Steelers have a lot to play for. They've already clinched a playoff berth, but they're playing for a division crown. If somehow the Cleveland Browns should beat the Baltimore Ravens in the early game on Saturday, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be playing for the division crown. If they beat Pittsburgh, they win the AFC North. However, if Baltimore wins earlier in the day, the Steelers still have something to play for, because if they win against the Bengals, they'll be locked into the number 5 seed. You want to be the 5 seed, because if you are, you're going to go and play a division winner who's going to be the number 4 seed. You're going to play them on the road. That will be the Houston Texans. Nobody is leaking oil going into the playoffs more than the Houston Texans. They're limping and leaking more than any team headed into the postseason. So if you're Pittsburgh, you want to get that number 5 seed by beating the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm not saying they will. I'm not advocating that they do. I'm just saying that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to have their work cut out for them, because it's not going to be a team that's going to just lay down and allow the Cincinnati Bengals to win. Plus, they're an AFC North team. We don't do that for anybody anyway, not in this division. You're going to have to earn what you get. You know, in the jungle, they say you eat what you kill. That's right. And if you don't get a kill, you don't eat. That's just the survival of the fittest. And that's what the Bengals have to do when they head to Pittsburgh on Saturday. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bleav in Bengal podcast. Yours truly, Solomon Wilcots, and our Bleav in Bengals insider, Charlie Goldsmith. Charlie, the playoff hopes are still alive and kicking after a grueling Saturday night win in overtime against a really good Denver Broncos defense. First of all, are you surprised that we're still in this thing going into the final week of the season? Joe Burrow would not let this season die, would he?
What this season has been about is how much can Jamar and T and Joe Burrow, and to an extent Trey Hendrickson on defense as well, save an entire roster full of flaws. Just look at the game on Saturday. You had a kicker who couldn't make a kick. You're allowing a 60-yard throw over the top. The run defense is inconsistent as it's always been. Your running back gets hurt. Your offensive tackle is crumbling. But they've found a way more recently to do what they didn't do early in the season, and that's close out these games.
How much was Joe Burrow saying to Zach Taylor after Cade York missed a 33-yard field goal in overtime when they somehow miraculously got the ball back? And I have to credit the defense for getting the ball back 3 times for the Bengals in that overtime frame. But that last time, no way was Joe Burrow going to allow a kicker to come walking back out on the field. He seemed determined to cash it in himself.
Yeah, it didn't even matter that they were pretty much out of goal line plays because of how much they had been down there this season. It was kind of some audacity to that call as well. The play was get the ball to T. We don't care what you're going to run against it. We don't care that you have one of the best defenses in the league. We don't care that we probably should be kicking the ball. It's Burrow, Higgins. By the way, Jamar also broke free from Pat Surtain on that play. So Jamar could have been the hero just as easily in a matchup that he won against the best corner in football. And that's what these guys do. They win their matchups. They win more often than not. And they're as fun to watch as it gets.
Look, I know the defense allowed them to keep tying the game after Joe looked like he put points on the board. We would allow him to get back in it, even in regulation. But I do think the defense should be given credit for the stops they did get in overtime. And what can we say about the Cincinnati Bengals offense? Maybe one of the best in the NFL, because they did go up against arguably one of the best defenses in the NFL. The Denver Broncos came into Paycor Stadium leading the league in sacks, and we found out why. They had 7 sacks on Joe Burrow.
If its offensive line is crumbling, Orlando Brown playing on a broken leg, and while powering through, it's one of the most admirable things I've seen from a pass protector. You can see that he's fighting it on just about every snap. Cody Ford, a guy who they signed to be a backup, played his worst game as a Bengal on Saturday. Ted Karras has been fine, but then at right guard, you have Alex Kappa, who's been their worst lineman all season. And then Devin Cochran, fresh off the practice squad, and is showing the part as well. The fact that they had to get rid of the ball quickly. Zach Taylor tried to manufacture ways to get Jamar and T the ball, trusting them to win their one-on-one matchups. That's why it was a lot of slants, a lot of back shoulder balls, a lot of goes, and a lot of digs over the middle. What can you do to keep Burrow in as much timing, or with as much timing, as much rhythm as is humanly possible against a pass rush that's just going to win its fair share of reps against you? That, to me, from a schematic standpoint, was one of the most impressive parts of the game. Yeah, Burrow took 7 sacks, but they also did a great job protecting him with their play calls.
Cincinnati Bengals have scored 27 points or more in 7 of their last 8 games. Joe Burrow has just been phenomenal in terms of what he's been able to do. 3 touchdown passes and just consecutive games, 8 straight games where he's been able to do that, I think is simply incredible. He continues to just play at a very high level. He's had 10 games this season where he's had 3 or more touchdown passes. That is simply mind-boggling. He's already thrown for over 4,000 yards and 40 touchdown passes. I want you to help our viewers and our listeners to understand what goes into this MVP criteria. What has to happen? Because everybody seems to think they know how to vote for an MVP. So, Charlie Goldsmith, help us out here.
Yeah, well, I guess from a logistical standpoint, there's the AP voters that cast their ballots. But that's kind of what's cool about this debate. I really do love this MVP debate right now because it's kind of a no wrong answer type of thing. It's an old school, out on the playground, like you're 10 years old debating. Well, Burrow's got this defense that he's playing with. Oh, but he has the receivers that Lamar and Josh Allen don't have. Oh, but they have these offensive lines and these cores around them helping out the way they play with their game script. And you could talk yourself into circles through this all day. All I know is that, man, I'd want Joe Burrow on my team, and that the Bengals are better built for Joe Burrow being their quarterback than anyone else. And with the way that Burrow has led this team, emotionally, with the way that Burrow, earlier in this decade changed the way people felt about just what the Bengals were as a brand, the way that, like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson couldn't do the offense that the Bengals had to run on Saturday because of the offensive line problems. Like all these things that Burrow can do, no other quarterback can do. And now Allen and Mahomes and Lamar can do things that Burrow can't do as well. But what Burrow can do is, and his unique strengths are perfect for what Cincinnati has built.
And really, I got to be honest, the way that, say, some of the components, maybe the defense, allowing the game to be tied and then go into overtime, it's making him stretch. And he's showing that he's up to it. But you don't get maybe the 400-yard passing game. You don't get the multiple games of 3 touchdown passes or more. If our defense was playing better, he could be more conservative. It would mean more wins in the win column. But right now, what it does mean, it means he has to be more statistically better than any other quarterback in the league because of the fact that we don't have a kicker right now, or because the defense is allowing maybe the offense to stay even with us. So just kind of give us your thoughts on how those other sort of underperforming metrics is really skewing his numbers even higher. But boy, has he lived up to it.
And you even see it on specific plays. There are moments where Joe Burrow, if the Bengals had a defense that was allowing 20 points per game, there are moments where Joe Burrow would check it down, where Joe Burrow would play it safer, where Joe Burrow would manage the game. The 2021 Raiders road game was the perfect example of Burrow knew all he had to do was manage that game. And, Allen and Jackson have had moments like that this season. Mahomes, that's kind of been his whole season. And you know what? Talk about the best game manager of all time. If you want to call Mahomes a system quarterback, if he's got to be sure, because he's won a bunch of MVPs. But that's how he has to play this year because of how good the Chiefs defense is. Well, Burrow's had to do the exact opposite. Instead of, taking the quick check down or protecting himself, avoiding a sack, Burrow's had to run 3 circles around the pocket, do the hokey pokey, and try to see if he could find an open receiver down the field. Mahomes and Allen and Jackson don't have to do that because they're going to get more bites at the apple. Burrow has to score 30 points, so you need to just naturally be more aggressive on an individual down perspective, and because of that, he's taken more sacks. Because of that, he's even fumbled a few times. That's kind of the risk reward you balance when you take a chance like Burrow has. But by far, Burrow's successes have outweighed any fumble or two that he's had this season. He's had to kind of play pedal to the metal, and he's navigating it as well as I've seen any quarterback.
We've even seen him just hover above the ground and still throw a touchdown pass. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like it. Cade York, listen, when I saw how determined Zach Taylor was in those early possessions in their game against the Denver Broncos, they were not going to kick a field goal. They were going to go for it on 4th down. I think they were trying to get some points early in situations where normally it would have been okay to go ahead and kick the field goal. There's something about Cade York that forces our play caller and Zach Taylor to double down on going on 4th down. And I got to tell you, when he missed the 33-yarder in overtime, I said, yep, Zach was right. Go for it on 4th down if you have to, because bringing out a kicker that you're not certain about, it puts the play caller in a very precarious situation. What do you think they're going to do moving forward?
It's not just the kicker. They wish it was just the kicker. It's the defense too. And particularly for the first 3 quarters, when I looked at a lot of those decisions, I was thinking, I mean, this is a head coach that doesn't have a lot of confidence in his defense. Even going for a touchdown in that, they mismanaged the clock a bit before the Chase Brown penalty, but then instead of taking the knee and kicking the field goal with 50 seconds versus getting the touchdown with about 100 seconds left, that decision was Zach Taylor showing you how he really feels about his defense. And these are just things they have to live with. And this is why the Bengals are 8-8. And, Cade York actually had a bit of confidence in Cade. And then I lost all that when he missed that kick. And then in overtime, they didn't even give him, later in overtime, they didn't even give him a chance. So that's just life for the Bengals right now. Who knows? McPherson's eligible to come off IR. I don't have an update to share there on how he's doing. But if he is progressing, it was something he was trying to play through earlier. I don't know where he's at. But certainly they showed you how they felt about their kicking game on Saturday as well.
Really tough to kick with a growing injury. There is no doubt about it. It's one of the areas where kickers it's going to be hard to perform with that kind of injury. Well, looking ahead with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Week 18 slot, they have something to play for. Division title is still on the line. If Baltimore wins early in the day on Saturday, Baltimore will claim the AFC North Division crown. But the Pittsburgh Steelers still have something to play for. You'd rather be a number 5 seed going on the road to play Houston than if they were to lose to the Bengals, they would fall in the seeding and then would have to go to either, Buffalo or Kansas City. Of course, Kansas City's not playing in the very first week, but as you well know, you'd rather be playing Houston other than having to go to Buffalo. Is that a fair point?
Also, honestly, even if it weren't for the seeding, I'd probably be playing my starters anyway if I were Mike Tomlin. I mean, this Steelers team is kind of a mess right now when you look at the communication issues you're seeing in the secondary, when you're seeing the comments that players on defense are making about other players on the defense, seemingly singling out people without dropping names, when you look at the fact that the offense has lacked an identity ever since George Pickens had that injury. When you look at all the moving pieces that have kind of been changing in the secondaries, Joey Porter got banged up and they've had some other corners in and out. This is a team that just needs to remember how to win a football game and needs to make some plays to win a football game to head into the postseason with confidence. And obviously the Bengals are set out to not let Pittsburgh do that this week. But if I were Mike Tomlin, I'd be playing my starters anyway against the Bengals.
I got to say this, Charlie, the Cincinnati Bengals, since appearing on Hard Knocks, I think they've only lost 1 game since the show started airing about 4 weeks ago, featuring the AFC North Division. Since then, the Pittsburgh Steelers have lost 3 in a row. Baltimore's won 3 in a row. And the Bengals have won 4 consecutive games. So I would have to – I've been watching the show. I love the show, but our Cincinnati Bengals have shown very well on that show, the Hard Knocks AFC North sort of programming. And now they're going to get both teams, or I should say both games. All 4 teams are going to play on Saturday. This should help that show finish up in grand finale. And hopefully our Cincinnati Bengals can continue to show well on that whole entire series.
I have a question. Do you think do you think some teams handle Hard Knocks better than others, or is it just kind of a wash at the end of the day that you just have some cameras around? Does that stuff really matter? And do some teams find an edge or a disadvantage with it?
I don't think it impacts how players approach the game. I don't think it impacts the coaches, how they approach the game. I do think that just having that camera there, it's present. And then let's face it, they're going home and they're watching the episodes as well. I think what it changes is the outside perception that people have of you. And I do think it can help shape their perceptions and how they feel about you. I think if you're watching that show, I think you're feeling pretty good about the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, you'd be feeling good about them because they've won 4 in a row. So you're going to be feeling pretty good about it. But if you are watching the episode, I think it sort of emphasizes or heightens the already good feeling that you have. And if you already have a bad feeling because you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and your team has lost 3 in a row, and you know how fans are with NFL teams, you live and die each week with your team. But then when you're going and watching some episode that's showing you some behind the scene moments of how that's playing out, then I think all of those feelings that you bring to that you already have on your own, I think it's heightened one way or the other. You have a deeper depth of despair if your team has lost 3 in a row when it's being chronicled and televised, right, on a great series like Hard Knocks. But you're feeling really good about yourself if you've been on a run, and that's where the Bengals are. And let's face it, Cincinnati Bengals have something to feel good about. We thought our team was left for dead without the playoffs, but number 9 wouldn't let us quit, would he?
I mean, he keeps, I don't know, increasing the degree of difficulty with the plays he's making, with the way the season has transpired. This might be my favorite Joe Burrow season, even though the team success won't be there. This might be the most I've enjoyed just watching Burrow operate both on and off the field in the way that, so much has changed about the way he plays the game and then the way he kind of speaks his mind off the field as well.
Joey B for MVP. That's what I'm saying, Charlie. That's how I feel about it. I don't know that he'll win it because we tend to want to prescribe win-loss records to quarterbacks. I think that's a team record. But I do think if you look at the metrics shows that he has a winning production, a production that should lead to wins. Okay, when he was on that one graph where all the quarterbacks that had thrown for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a single game for 4 consecutive games, all of those quarterbacks, whether it's Pat Mahomes, whether it was Peyton Manning, whether it was Steve Young, they all have winning records next to their names, other than Joe Burrow, which tells you it's a team stat. Winning and losing is about teams. It's not a one-man stat in the NFL. At least that's what I'm going with. What would your thoughts be on that?
So one of my favorite movies is Cars. I don't know if you're familiar with the Pixar classic. But in the Pixar movie, Lightning McQueen, the great race car, teams up with Doc Hudson, who's a legendary 3-time Piston Cup winner, and that's the MVP of the Cars universe. And Lightning goes, "Doc, you won 3 Piston Cups," and Doc says, "Lightning, it's just an empty cup." And so that's kind of how I'm thinking too. Like, even if Joe Burrow doesn't win the MVP, it's just an empty cup. Burrow is an MVP. Even if he doesn't win the MVP this year, Burrow is an MVP. And at the end of the day, you either have that guy or you don't. As I like to say, you either have the guy who can go into Arrowhead in January and believe that he is the better quarterback, and you will win that game. And you can have that debate with Burrow and Mahomes, but Burrow is that guy. Burrow believes when he goes into Arrowhead in January, he's going to win. And oh, by the way, he's the only active player that's done it too. So whether or not Burrow wins the MVP this year and gets that empty cup, Burrow's an MVP.
Well said by our very own Charlie Goldsmith. Words of wisdom. I absolutely love it. All right, it's time now to name our performer of the week when the Cincinnati Bengals prevailed in overtime, week 17, over the Denver Broncos. Of course, our performer of the week is brought to you by French Creek Roofing, Greater Cincinnati's choice for roofing, windows, and siding. Of course, they do a great job. Give the people at French Creek Roofing a call if you're looking to get a new roof, new windows, or new siding. And of course, our performer of the week has to be T. Higgins. 3 touchdown passes in the game against that Denver Broncos defense. Oh, by the way, Riley Moss, who is a really good cornerback, by the way, he had spent the previous 3 weeks on injured reserve. Probably should have stayed there for another week because T. Higgins gave him the business. 3 touchdown receptions in the game for T. Higgins. He was targeted 12 times in this game, by the way. Caught 11 of the 12 passes that were thrown to him, 3 of them for touchdowns. I know he had the fumble. That allowed the Denver Broncos to feel good about themselves. But you know how many points the Denver Broncos scored after collecting that fumble from T. Higgins? 0. That's because our defense then got an interception off Bo Nix, off their quarterback. So that fumble led to the possession of the ball for Denver, led to them giving the ball right back to us, to which Joe Burrow and company took it right back down to score a touchdown. So the fumble really didn't cost us anything, maybe an opportunity to score on that possession. But T. Higgins more than made up for it. 3 receiving touchdowns in the week 17 game against Denver. Do you know he has 5 touchdown receptions over the last course of the Bengals' last 3 ball games? He's been phenomenal for the Cincinnati Bengals. He is a player we definitely do not want to have to live without. I do not want to go into the 2025 season without T. Higgins on this roster. And everyone should let the Cincinnati Bengals know about it. We want T. Higgins to stay on this team. We're a better team with T. Higgins than we are without T. Higgins. So he is our performer of the week. All right, Bleav in Bengals fans, it's time now to look ahead to the action of Week 18. Of course, it's brought to you by the good people at Midwest Hospice during a very difficult time of a family, friend, or loved one. If you could just think about the people at Midwest Hospice, if you need someone to care for a loved one or a good friend, they are the people to give a call. They've been serving Cincinnati for the last 10 years. Of course, we're looking ahead to the season finale, Week 18, in our game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a game that we absolutely have to win if we want to go to the playoffs. Can't go to the playoffs unless we win this game. However, if we do win the game, we're going to need help from two different teams. We're going to need help from the Denver Broncos to go in and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. We also need help from the New York Jets. They have to beat the Miami Dolphins. If the Denver Broncos lose and the Cincinnati Bengals beat Pittsburgh on Saturday night, and then the Broncos are able to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Miami Dolphins win against the Jets, the Dolphins would then go to the playoffs. They would get the number 7 seed. If the Dolphins lose, then the Bengals would get that playoff spot, number 7 seed, and go into the postseason. That's probably the most dangerous team going into the playoffs. There are a lot of teams in the AFC that do not want to see the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson and Chase Brown. There are a lot of teams in the AFC that do not want to see the Cincinnati Bengals going into the playoffs. They are a dangerous team. They are a team that have scored 27 points or more in 7 of their last 8 games. This is a team that has seen a quarterback like Joe Burrow throw for 3 touchdowns in 10 games this season. And in each of the last 8 games in a row, he's had 3 touchdowns or more. Joe Burrow right now is just very close to throwing for 5,000 yards on the season. He only needs about maybe, I think, 350 yards or so to top 5,000 yards for the season. That would not only be a new franchise record, no quarterback ever in Cincinnati Bengals history has had a 5,000-yard passing season. So Joe Burrow is doing some phenomenal things. I think look, there's no doubt. Charlie Goldsmith said it, that even if you don't give him the trophy, Joe Burrow has had an MVP season. There is no doubt about it. He has had an MVP season, and we absolutely love him for keeping this team's playoff hopes alive. I think he's inspired his teammates. I think he's inspired everyone in the city. Just when it seemed like we thought, when the team was, 4-8? That's right. Before this 4-game win streak, the Bengals were 4-8. Looked like they were going nowhere fast. And Joe Burrow would not allow this team to give up hope. He kept winning, kept battling, kept striving for perfection. We absolutely love it. Love his competitiveness, love his grit and his grind. The dude is an absolute dog, along with some talented players around him. And I see you, T. Higgins. Way to bounce back, baby. Keep it up. We'll see you next week right here on the Bleav in Bengals podcast. Thank you for joining us, everyone.